Hello, this is J. Mohan, and welcome to another one of the podcasts, Conversations in Innovation, where we talk about all things innovation and entrepreneurship. And to keep up to date with what's happening in our world, follow me on LinkedIn and also on our website, harrisburgu.edu. We have been having this podcast for the last few months, and we have been extremely lucky to get some incredible guests from Google, from Facebook, and also some of the great local entrepreneurs and innovative leaders. So today we are very lucky to have Dave Schankweiler, who was the co-founder of Central Penn Business Journal, which he sold, but he's actively involved in a lot of the entrepreneurship and somebody I consider a dear friend of me and the CIE. So Dave, thanks for taking the time. So my first question is, what are you doing these days? What does your day look like? Where do you spend most of the time? What's interesting that you are seeing or involved with?
So, excellent question. I sold our company 8 years ago, and one of the best advice I got when I sold the company was, for a whole year, don't agree to do anything. And I did that. And I thought a lot about what I should be doing. So here, my problem is I'm that typical type A personality. I have a hard time saying no. Right. So I'm involved in a couple of things. First of all, I sit on a couple of corporate boards. So that is exciting to me that I keep my hands in business. One of those corporate boards happens to be a media company in the Midwest, and a fifth generation company with a number of properties. So I've really enjoyed being on that board. I do a good amount of nonprofit boards in not only in the city, but my college board and that type of thing. And then my wife and I, we tend to like to volunteer and do a number of things geared toward the city of Harrisburg. And what more can we do to help the place where we live, where we used to work, and where we enjoy.
So we'll circle back to that and get a little more detail into that after we share a little bit of the story of the Business Journal and how it got started. So let's start from the beginning, right? I mean, were you a media person? How did the Business Journal come about, and what was that? What was that early days look like?
So the early days were very interesting. I always like to say I fell into the business. I didn't have a media background. In fact, I came out of college and had an accounting degree and vowed the day I graduated I don't ever want to touch this stuff. And then I went to work for AMP Incorporated, where I had an internship. I was in their marketing department. I quickly learned the corporate world was not something I wanted to do the rest of my life. And
what was it? What was it about the corporate world?
It's very structured. At AMP at that time, it was like, well, when you're at this level, you can have this lamp and you can have this kind of desk. And I was young. I wanted to do a lot more. It was a great experience for me, though. The couple years I spent there, it was great. I left there with another gentleman to become small business consultants, because we were 24. I had an accounting degree. He had a marketing degree, and we knew everything there was to know about business. And we were out a couple weeks with this small business consulting company, and a gentleman came to us who had published 2 issues of a paper called Strictly Business. And he came to us he said, I've lost all my money. I need to shut this down. So my partner and I, we said, let's buy this, and we'll get our name known around town, and then we'll sell it, and we'll have this great business consulting gig. So we bought it for $5,000. It was the worst $5,000 I ever spent, and it was the best $5,000 I ever spent, because we bought nothing. But it was the start of my lifelong career and passion. I was very lucky for 32 years. I absolutely loved what I did. And my partner, 2 years came and went, and I bought him out because I really liked the media business. And then we started with this monthly business journal in central Pennsylvania. And then we made several acquisitions. We owned one in New Jersey. We owned one in Lehigh Valley. We started a web company. You might be familiar with the Best Places to Work program. We started a company to do the research and did probably, when I left, we probably had 65 Best Places to Work programs around the country. So we got into a lot of different things. It was, it's funny, I say I didn't want to touch that accounting degree the day I graduated. Believe me, there were days like, well, why didn't I pay more attention to the accounting class? But it worked. So we were very fortunate to get in on an industry that really, it was a niche industry and it just took off.
So looking back, what was your strategy for growth, or how did, most entrepreneurs, I would say, are excellent. I am one of them. Even when the company was actually running, I didn't realize I'm an entrepreneur, right? So but then there's a point where you suddenly realize, oh crap, you are responsible for this business, and there are people working and all. So what was that pivot point for you? And from there, what was some of the strategy for your growth?
Our path was very typical of a startup business. I was 24. I didn't own a home. I didn't know how I was going to even finance this thing as we started to grow. I think I made 25 bank presentations until someone, Carolyn O'Keefe was her name, at Fulton Bank. I went in and she said to me, I don't have the authority to do this, but for some reason I believe in your idea. I'm going to give you a $25,000 line of credit. And I thought, oh, here we go. We had cash flow problems, and we were growing. So we were the typical startup kind of business. So in the beginning, you don't even think, wow, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm just scrambling to meet payroll every week. I can tell you, I started the business when I was 24. I think I was 28 years old when I finally said, I think I'm an entrepreneur. I remember when that happened because things started to click, and we were growing, and we were still having funding problems and trying to fuel the growth. But I remember saying, I think this is my career. It took me 4 years to realize that because, before that, you're just scrambling to do whatever you can. And my mentality was, I'm young. If this doesn't work, I'll find something else to do. But, man, I'm going to work really hard to make this work. And then one thing I should say is the other interesting part is my wife is from northeastern Pennsylvania, and she ran a major law firm up there. And when she came to downtown, when we got married and she moved here, she said, well, how about I work for you or work with you? And I said, I can't pay me. How am I going to pay the two of us, and what are we going to live on? Well, 2 years later, I needed her because, dealing with the money side of the things, the personnel side of things, I just wanted to focus on growing revenue. So Donna joined, and we worked together for 28 years in the business. She handled all the inside stuff, and I handled the revenue growth, and it worked very well.
So what were some of the strategies that you applied as you realized, okay, this is growing as a business? What were some of your approaches, across the board, things you did on the sales side, things you did on the marketing, because you are also, when you think right now, people, I teach a class, MBA class in Virginia, and we do Harvard Business Review case studies, and there's this whole, one of the case study where we talk about Facebook. Are they a content developer? Are they a social media? Same with Netflix. Now everybody's and so you are one of the core content collectors, releasing that, all of that, right? So what were some of your early, once you realized, okay, this is now a business, what were the strategies that you applied?
So my first strategy, and even in those beginning years when we didn't have any money, I would go through the sofa cushions and find some coins, and I would take a trip to somebody in the country who was already doing it and was ahead of me. And I would bring ideas back from Los Angeles, Chicago, also Des Moines and Little Rock.
Great point.
I'd take their ideas and if it was a big city idea, I could take it down to something that would fit for Central Pennsylvania. So I very much modeled what else was out there. I think the other key thing we did is even in our 32nd year, right before I sold, our culture was a very entrepreneurial culture. And, I would tell when we onboarded, and we had 150 employees when I sold. When we onboarded new employees, I spoke to every one of them, and my pitch was, if you do not have an entrepreneurial mindset, if you don't like and embrace change, this probably isn't a place for you, because we are known for being entrepreneurial in the products we put out there and how we deal with our customer base, and everybody is expected to do that. The good thing about being an entrepreneur is we're going to fail, and I would say, I as the owner and CEO, I failed a lot, and my employees pointed out my failures in fun, but we allowed that from day one for people. So, our culture was very important in growing the business.
So, that culture part, right? I mean, everybody talks about culture, right? The business, but it's not a, you can't measure it. You but you look at great companies like yours that scaled up and was able to exit. The culture is a key part. How do you, when you look back, because when you are doing it, most of the time you don't realize that you are the one that's driving. You can't write. You could write things on the wall and things like that, but ultimately it's the leader who kind of drives that culture, right? So when you talk about that whole entrepreneurship culture in a business, right? Like you shared that, point out the failures and, comfortable with failures is key part of it. But how do you do that consistently when you, like maybe 20, 25 people company, you can do that. But when you get to like 50, 100 and more, how do you keep that going?
So I say we were entrepreneurial, but we were also a very formulaic and systematic company. So when we started making acquisitions, we had already, and in fact, I had an employee one time say to me, with our accounting system, why are you doing this? Because it's too much for a company our size. And my thinking was, yeah, but then we're going to be ready down the road. So whether it was our personnel policies or our we had a very in-depth cost accounting system, or it was our, if we had events, every event had a binder, and here's the process. We had a process for everything. So we were entrepreneurial and excited about creating new things, but we also had a system when we did that. And no matter if it was 25, 50, or when we got to 150 employees, follow the system. The system wasn't limiting to hurt our creativity. I think by being so buttoned up with our systems, it allowed us to be even more creative.
That's a great point. So, most of the conversations that I have had with founders, they talk about repeatable processes, right? That's the way to scale up a business. That's exactly where you are talking about, right? So, when you talk innovation, right? So somebody I was talking to, he said, hey, we are old school, innovation is kind of like, but then when you start talking about that, you realize there is innovation, right? So when I bring up the word innovation, right, in your business, right, there's part of it, like you said, the scaling up of, creating repeatable processes. But you also talked about events and some of those things, right? So that is really, the innovative thinking. So when you look back at your business, what were some of those innovations that you tried? And talk to me about at least one thing that failed, and maybe one or two that really worked, and one that really surprised even you that, oh, wow, we didn't think we would be able to pull that off.
So a couple things in response to that. So even today, people, when they know what I did, people would say to me, oh, wow, you were in newspapers, print. How'd that go? Must have been awful. Our industry, the business journal world, business publications, is it's still growing. The year I sold, our profits were some of the best we ever had. It's because of the innovation. So I look back, we started as a print product, and then we created this thing, and I took it from an idea from my friend Connie in Des Moines, who was the publisher of the Des Moines Business Journal, we came up with the Fax 500. Every day at noon, we would fax the top headlines to the 500 top CEOs in central Pennsylvania, which was kind of innovative. And now you think, I mean, there's some kids who would say, what's a fax machine? You know, that led us into when the web came about and email came about. We took that list, and then it was an email blast, which grew to be a huge percentage of our revenue, advertising on our email blast. And then we got into the event side of the business, and that really took off for us too. I can tell you about lots of mistakes, whether there was a print product we made a mistake on. Probably the biggest one, my team would say, we tried to do a women's expo, and I'm bragging, but we were great. We were great at our events. We had a super event team that made all that happen. I tried it once and it failed. Well, I tried it 2 more times, and it still failed. You know, I didn't learn from myself. We've done a lot of that. I want to go back to something we were talking about before, and we weren't a print news company. This is how I phrased it to my staff, and how we talked about it all the time, and enforced this message. We were in economic development because our information and our opportunity for local companies to advertise in our products, whatever those products were, we were helping them to grow their revenue. And by growing their revenue, we were helping their employees make bigger paychecks. So we weren't in the news business. We were in the economic development business. And if it wasn't our news and those products, our events, we brought people together to help them sell their product to each other and to network. So that's what we were. We always talked about we're an economic development agency. We are not a print news agency. So it gets back to something you had asked.
Right. So that's an amazing positioning, and I almost if any of my friends at Facebook or Coinbase or Netflix are listening, here's a guy you want on your board, because that's kind of how the company should be thinking about when they cross industry, and because people try to kind of put you into these boxes, like so the way you defined it is really, so the follow-up question is, you said like a couple of things that failed, and how do you deal with setbacks, and both on a personal level and when you're running a company, there's so many people responsible, and how do you come back and keep that?
I was a big reader of business books. I searched out other CEOs, and I wanted to spend a lot of time with them. And you've probably heard this a number of times. I was the first one to say, sorry, it's on me. And even if it wasn't on me and it was somebody else in the company, I'd still say, I'm the lead guy. It's my fault. We'll fix it. Early on in the business, about when I was it was 5 years into the business, we took on an investor because we were growing, and we went to this investor forum. They had this 5-minute pitch you could do. We did the pitch, and we got an offer, and we took it. It wasn't a good offer. We were desperate because I didn't know how I was going to keep going, and the banks weren't helping me with the company. Well, this gentleman turned out to be a shark, and not in a good sense. Right. And when I bought my partner out, he said, that's not what I signed up for. And he said, I have more money than you'll ever have, Dave. I'm going to sue you till I take this company. Wow. So he threw 5 lawsuits on me. Wow. And every time we would win the lawsuit, he would throw another one on me. And there was a period I was up for 3 days straight just worrying about this. And I finally said, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it anymore. We'll just carry on, and somehow we'll figure it out. And I want to credit the attorney that McNeese Wallace was our attorneys. We racked up a legal bill north of $150,000, which doesn't sound like a lot of money,
Right,
but in those
right.
days, and they turned to us and said, Dave, we're just going to trade you advertising for that, which was like, oh, this is so nice of them to help a small business by doing that. And I finally, there's much more to the story, but I finally negotiated with the gentleman's daughter, and there's a whole story there that would take 15 minutes, but it worked out. And it's interesting. I now look back at that and say, that was a hard time in my life, but I look back at it and say, that was a great lesson for me. And I don't regret having to go through that at all. And I also, another big lesson for me was, in the early days, if somebody came along and said, Dave, here's $1 million for your business, I think I would have gone out of business if I had $1 million. I think I look back at the bootstrapping and the trying to figure it out. That was the best thing for me and our staff, because we figured it out, and it made us a better company because of that.
Yeah, that's so true, because we have an incubator here, and we always have these founders who come and say, all I need is a little bit of money. Everything else I figured out. And then, 2 conversations in, you figure out there's a lot of things they need to figure out. Money is never the problem. But, the flip side is, I raise money from the Valley, and, part of that problem is there, where sometimes they throw a lot of money at you, and then you kind of go completely sideways.
Yep.
Because, you spend it on the wrong things, and, all of that. So fast forward from that into, take us through the exit, right? What does that process look like? And how was it, like, did you always have a plan that this is some business that I'm going to sell at a certain point, or was that organically happened, or, how did that all?
It was not a business we were going to sell, because I thought, well, maybe someday my children would want to do that. And I have 3 children. The 2 oldest took a different career path. My youngest, and I'll never forget, one time we were sitting around the dinner table, and Don and I worked together, and we talk a lot about business, and the kids picked up a lot of the business side of things. And one time I said, are any of you interested in coming into the business? And the 3 of them went, are you kidding me? And work as hard as the 2 of you? I don't want to do that. But then a couple months later, we're in the car with my youngest son. He said, Dad, I might want to do that. Well, fast forward to 8 years ago, and we weren't really looking to sell, and then the opportunity came. It was a very good offer. So, of course, Don and I talked about it a lot. And then we went to the kids and said, here's what's going on. And I said to my youngest, Drew, if you were to come into the business, you'd probably have to go work somewhere else, and then you'd come in the business and work your way up. And I said that would put me probably into my late 60s, early 70s. Not so sure I want to do that. I said, here's the opportunity before us. What do you think? And he said, I think it's a good thing for you to do, for us to do. And so we did. Because I had made some acquisitions during our business cycle, right. I learned a lot about the process, so that was very good for me. So when we went through the process, I understood it and really knew what was happening. The difficult part is when a potential buyer says things you've got to read between the lines. Right. I don't think I read between enough of the lines as far as where the business is today, but those things happen.
So, since you touched about the family and all of that, want to get a little bit into that. But before that, just wrapping up that exit conversation, right? Because what surprised me during our exit was the things that we never thought would be important became really important. Like, what is our accounting system and how it matches with the company that is trying to acquire us? And, those were like, so what were some of the things that surprised you when you went through that process? And how would you advise small businesses out there that's, kind of doing very well and growing, if they are thinking of like, I want to exit at some point, like big picture wise, what are some of the things they should be prepared?
What the companies that looked at us were most impressed with, and I'm going to go back to a previous discussion we had, was our systems and our process. And the fact that we had everything documented, that, if one employee left that was a key employee, there was a notebook that we could hand the next person coming in and say, here's how you make it happen. When we made an acquisition, we had everything all set up, ready to go, so that we could go into that market, and it worked. And it's funny, and just to digress for a minute, I remember one acquisition we made, and the employees at the time said, "Oh, we're not like Central Pennsylvania. We're kind of metropolitan, and we're a lot different than there." And I remember, months later, a couple employees came and said, "I get it now. I see why you have this process, and if it works in Central Penn, it's going to work in New Jersey or wherever." So those that looked at us knew we were pretty buttoned up, and especially with, you mentioned the accounting system. We were a small company, but in our accounting system, we had a cost accounting system that every product we did, down to if it was a supplement or a single event, we knew the exact profit or loss on that event or that supplement, which is rare in small business. A lot of small businesses don't do that, but you have to know where you're making your money, and these much larger companies really appreciated that. The company that bought us said, "We like that so much, we want to incorporate that nationwide in our other things," but they were too big. It's hard to take the ship in a different direction, so they didn't end up doing that. But that's the reason they bought us.
So since you touched on the family, let's talk a little bit about, so Dave, tell us about your family, and, you said 3 kids. Where are they?
So my oldest daughter, Kate, lives with her husband, Pat, in Chicago, and they've just blessed us with our first grandchild,
Well,
little girl,
congratulations.
Margot, and she's, of course, adorable. And Kate is a nurse practitioner in oncology in Chicago. Then Parker was in Baltimore, has moved back to Harrisburg, and lives in Dauphin with his brand new wife. They just got married last November, Angelique, and he is in sales and doing really well. And then my youngest son, Drew, who I mentioned previously, he's in Hoboken and is in medical device sales for Stryker, and he's doing very well also.
So, when you exited out, you got some time to spend with the kids, and, kind of had the time. And now I'm assuming you're, now back involved, because you talked a little bit about some of the boards and other things you're involved. So where are you spending a lot of time now? And what excites you these days when you look out there, whether it's the media, the industry, all of that?
So what gets me excited and passionate and in wanting to stay involved, my first thing in 32 years of business was the creativity side. I loved creating new products, new markets, delving into trying new things. That was what I enjoy. I think in the boards I'm on, or whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, I hope I've been helpful on the ideation side of things, because that's what I really enjoy. What's interesting to me is there's still opportunity out there for, in my industry, business journals are still doing exceptionally well. It says to me there is a niche for still good editorial products, because all of, in our industry, it's all local, and unfortunately, local isn't happening with daily newspapers or other outlets. And unfortunately, I think there is a shortage of local information. So business journalism be a piece of that. You know, I think there's room for daily newspapers if they do it right. There are some that are doing exceptionally well, but you've got to be willing to be entrepreneurial about it and change the model.
So where are you currently spending majority of your time?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Right now, I'm spending a lot of time with one of my for-profit boards that I'm on. I'm doing some consulting with them, help them buy some publications, and now we got them at a very good price. So I'm consulting to help them turn that around, which has my fingers back in the business, which is fun. I mentioned earlier, Don and I really enjoy this place we live, and we're involved with a couple ventures to hopefully improve the city and some of the services in the city. So we're doing that. We travel. We've been very fortunate to travel a lot, and then we enjoy time with our 3 children, so we try and see them as much as possible.
So I'm going to throw out a few words, just
Okay.
whatever comes to mind, and what you think. So let's start with Harrisburg. When I say Harrisburg, I know you're very passionate about it, but
Opportunity.
explain why. Because most people, I'm new to the area, and when I came in, initially the thing that struck me was either people would say we are like 3 hours or 4 hours from New York, 2 hours to Washington D.C., Philly, all of that. And the other part was I found it like, the region was so kind of parochial in the sense like people are like in West Shore, East Shore, this kind of thing. But you are one of those people that over time I have talked to is very passionate about the region, care about this, think this is a great, an opportunity is the perfect word that you always say. Explain why and how you see that.
So I think of in 2 words. I should have said future opportunity.
Okay.
It's always interesting to me when visitors come to Harrisburg and they tell me how really cool our city is and the architecture and the river and the art scene here for a city our size. I think we're our own worst enemies because we don't stop and say, all right, what are the good things we have here? Yeah, there are some things we need to work on and clean up and do differently, but we do have a pretty amazing base to build upon, and we can do that. I said earlier that one of the things that I did throughout my career was go visit. I belonged to a very good association of business journal owners. I would go visit them whenever I had the chance. A lot of them were in capital cities. Right now, I'm doing that consulting in Madison, Wisconsin, capital city. I look at these other capital cities, and I'm always saying, all right, what do they have that we don't? What do we have that they don't? And we've got some nice assets that we can build on. And I want to utilize my history with Harrisburg University and go back to when we first started the university. People said to us, "You're crazy. We don't need that. We have a really big university right up the road and in State College. Why do you have to do this?" And I look now on what the executives at HU and the staff and what we have now, and it was a phenomenal thing that we did in the beginning and those that took over after we got the thing kicked off. So if we can build a university that now has 6,000 students in the city of Harrisburg and has all these varied programs, and if you meet our students, so what else can we do besides a university? We're a capital city that could be a model for other capital cities, just working on the things that we've got here. And you mentioned the East Shore, West Shore. We've got to convince our residents this is a really great place to be, and look at what other things we can do to attract and retain residents, businesses, and tourists, because we can do it.
So, after Harrisburg, the next word I was going to say was Harrisburg University. So you kind of already talked about that. And the last one, for selfish reasons, CIE,
So CIE, when we envisioned the university back in 1999 and 2000, from the very beginning, we talked about we've got to have an incubator associated with this university. It took a good many years, and we're, 3 years into it?
This is the fourth year.
Year four, and we've got an amazing thing happening in Center City under this gentleman's, Jay's leadership. We were fortunate to bring him in, and what he has done in 4 years would have taken people 3 and 4 times that amount of time to
Thanks for saying that.
to get it done. We see an opportunity since the beginning for an incubator, not only to give students an opportunity to see companies grow, but we started the university because we were nervous in the region that we lost AMP Incorporated, Rite Aid. There were a lot of companies leaving the area, and there weren't anything coming in new. And we didn't really have a technology base. And that's why we started a STEM school, so that we could generate not only employees for local companies, but also to generate new companies. And we're finally doing that under the CIE. And when you hear that we have 18 companies in incubation, and you hear the stories of those 18 companies, it's going to be fantastic what we're graduating out of CIE.
So now switching gear into big picture wise, right? Because you come from the media industry, you built a company in that space, you sold that company. And right now, if you look at the media space, big picture wise, so a whole lot of noise. One is there's too much information that people really don't know what's the right, and then there's the whole it's wrong information, and everybody is now a content builder, right? I mean, it's almost like I can create something and just throw it out there, and then it could be completely made up, but then somebody picks it up and all of that.
Right.
So as somebody who has seen that, up close and built a business, and now you look at the media, where would you look at where this is going? What is the opportunities and the challenges for the media, the people who are driving? Because, like I was saying before, the Facebooks of the world are also now quote or unquote media, right? But they are not creating any content.
No.
So, but then somebody else is. So, and like you were saying, the traditional, some of the so-called the Washington Post, the New York Times are also all struggling, and so what's your take on the whole space, and where do you see this going? And
so I go back to, are you familiar with the author Simon Sinek?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something we used heavily in our company was, what's our why? And I explained to you that our why was economic development. Right. Same goes for the media right now. You're absolutely right. There's so much noise in the media. There's so much noise on your phone. It's overwhelming. Right. But if you get back to the why, there's room for media outlets to be, and I hate to use the word trusted because it's overblown now, but if you go back to the why of a media company, and if you really look at that, that's where the opportunity is. Who's your customer? What do they need to know? In the business world, it's easy. Our customer was business owners, and they need to know who's doing what in the market. Where can I get more sales? How do I find more employees? That was easy. On the broader media scope, you've got it. There's a couple things going on. First of all, the noise. Second of all, younger people are getting their information a lot different than those of us who read the newspaper and listened to the evening news every night. That's how we got our news. Right. How do we deliver to younger people the information they need to know that they should know? And there's opportunities to do it. There's a magazine. So you hear magazines failing all the time in daily newspapers. There's a magazine called The Guardian. Their model,
British.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
They are the poster child for the way to do it right now. Their subscriptions are going through the roof. Their print product is doing well. Their web products are doing well. And they figured out what's our why. And here's how we deliver it. Here's what we charge for it. And they figured it out. Wall Street Journal is another one. Wall Street Journal has
Right.
figured it out too.
So given that insight, right, would you come back and do something? Do you see whether you or somebody else you would guide into this space? Because most entrepreneurs look at something and say there's an opportunity, while most other people will look at it and say this is a mess, this is a challenge, I want to walk away. Right? So do you see opportunities here right now
In our
in the
smaller
whole media?
community?
No, the media as a larger itself, right? Because you were talking about, because I get these news releases that are very almost structured, targeted marketing kind of, right? The things that I want to read. So, you mentioned Wall Street Journal and Guardian, right? I get those two, but there is also these organizations that's collecting and framing those, and I'm one of that, which they say this is the news release that Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, so they name all these.
Yeah.
These are the people that get, this is their daily read, right? So I'm seeing all these, so is there? I mean, what are the opportunities you see in this space? And if somebody is thinking there are people who say, okay, media is dead, print is, but at the same time, like you said, there's so much information.
Right. So how you started that question, if I were younger, I would love to be in the daily newspaper business and to really change that model, because I think there is opportunity there. Even in a small market like we have here, there's opportunity if you're delivering the content that the reader wants. They want to know what's happening in my world around me that affects me. It's the why again. There's opportunity in the daily news business. Yes, it's a combination of print, web, email blasts, events, and so on, but there is a need. And in our market, we have a need for information, and we're not getting it right now. I think that goes in other markets, that if you can boil it down to what that individual sitting in his house wants to know about how are things going to affect me out there, there is an opportunity.
So
I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
but
it does. So taking that a little more wider, right, from an industry perspective, all these people who are now running companies, if you look back, because you sold 8 years back, right? At that time itself, the technologies have started coming much more faster, emerging technology, right? Now you look at it, it's almost coming almost every month, right?
Yeah.
Some new thing is there. So AI, blockchain,
Right.
and the leaders, when we talk separately, there's always people asking me to give them advice, or kind of like, what are the things I should be worrying about, right? But from I think as a leader, as a business person, there's a different way to because you can't figure out all these technologies, right? So what would be that advice that you would give as you look back as you as a CEO of Business Journal and to all these people in different industries that's waking up and they see a new technology name and they're like, am I supposed to care about this? What would be that strategic advice you give leaders?
I think it's twofold. I think first of all, even before you start worrying about all those new technologies coming down the pike, is my business solid today? Is my core product what it needs to be to meet our customers' needs? And then if you can say yes to that, and a lot of entrepreneurs, they try all kinds of stuff. That's the one thing you have to learn is where's your focus, and don't get messed up by, oh, well, we better do this now and we better do that. It's not good. I mentioned we were an entrepreneurial company. We tried a lot of things, but they were things we tried that met our core business model and our customer base. If you can say that, and you're doing well on that side, when those new technologies come about, you absolutely should be investigating each one of those and saying, all right, what does this do to us? Is it, it's the old SWOT analysis. Is it going to help us? Is it going to hurt us? What are the challenges for it? And then what do we have to do to adapt to that challenge? I don't think it's something, if something comes across the transom tomorrow, it's a new idea, we better jump on that. You have time to kind of wait and feel it out, keeping an eye on it. But there's always opportunity there, but does it meet that core business that you're involved with?
So on that same thread, right? Most of the small businesses doesn't have the ability to look at all these technologies and all of that, right? So I have been kind of using the universities as kind of an extended research model, or reaching out and creating these kind of ecosystems around that, right? So if you were now starting another business, and with all these artificial intelligence and all of that, what would be some of the things that you would say, I'm a small business, I have, working on a limited budget, but what would be the other larger ecosystems or partners you would reach out, looking back at how you grew and, how...
Limited dollars, 24 hours in a day, you can't do it all. So, when I counsel young business, I say, what industry group are you involved with? Where are you a member? Do you have a peer group? I've told a number of businesses, if you want to really do well, find 4 other businesses in the other part of in the rest of the country that you don't compete with, and then you meet with them on a quarterly basis and throw ideas back and forth. I'll never forget when I first started meeting with other businesses, the first thought in my head was, oh, wow, they have that same problem. I'm not that stupid, So get an industry group, get a peer group, and then go outside of that and talk to businesses that aren't even in your industry group. Set a goal. Once a month, I'm going to call a CEO and just pick their brain. And I always would tell people, there's one thing business people like to do. They like to talk about their own business. So most business owners, especially if they started the company, remember the days when they were in the same shoes. They're going to talk to you. It will be rare that somebody won't help you and let you hear their business story. So it's about get outside your little box. And as the CEO, it's your job to be out there finding and listening for those opportunities or those challenges, and finding other people to say, hey, what are you doing about AI? What are you doing about the competition and thing? The answer's out there. Somebody's already figured it out. Just go find that person.
Which is a great advice, because the VCs always say every idea is an adaptation or stealing of an existing one and making it better or looking. So always look outside your industry for that, right? So that's really where. So, one of the recent guests on our podcast, which is a friend of both of ours, we talked about work-life balance, and he said, I am old school. I don't really believe that you can have, people who say, I have everything, right? He said, you can't be like a great golf player and a family and a business scaling up. And I said, I agree, because when we were doing the startup, it was hard. It was hard grind. So what's your take on this, and right now, mental health, work-life balance, this is all kind of, and so what's your take on that, and how does, an entrepreneur balance it?
So I will credit my wife, Donna, with how we structured our work-life balance. When we early days, we had this young business. We started having children. We bought this old house we were renovating, and there was a lot going on. And we set some ground rules at home. I was always home for dinner. We always had dinner together. When the kids went to bed, I went back to work. And I would work till 1, 2 in the morning, and then come home. I was young, so sleep I got sleep, but not a lot of hours sometimes. And then having Donna as my business partner, as well as my life partner, we were able to tag team a lot and do that.
So, I want to pull on that because there is typically this sense that a husband and wife starting a business is always, not a great idea.
Yeah.
Because you kind of carry it both places, and
Yeah.
What made it work for you guys?
So my grandparents owned a neighborhood grocery store in Shamokin, Pennsylvania, and they worked together. And not only did they work together, they lived above the store. So I would work there on holidays and my summers, and I saw firsthand how you do it. And when Donna and I started working together, again, I credit Donna. She said, "All right, we're going to put some rules in place to understand whose role is what." And she was very good about bringing us back to those roles. I have a lot of people over the years who said, "Oh, I could never work with my wife," or "I could never work with my husband." But we understood what our roles were, and we didn't cross over those at work or at home. And, again, credit to Donna. We had 3 kids. They were in daycare. That she did an amazing job there, as well as running the business side of things while I was out growing revenue. So it worked, but we understood each other. The byproduct of that with our 3 children is I look at them now in their careers, and I hear them talk about their thoughts on the people they work for, their coworkers, and work ethic, and we didn't win any parenting awards, but
We vibe from that.
They learned just from hearing our discussions about business, and we've raised 3 very independent children that I'm proud of them, and I think a lot of it had to do because of what Mom and Dad did every day.
So one last question, and we kind of wrap up. So, what's the one thing that people will be surprised about, because you're a very public-facing person, so most people know you. What's something that most people who know you would be surprised about you?
I think people are surprised to learn that I have a theatrical background.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. In college, I mentioned earlier about my accounting and not having a love for that, mainly because I spent more of my time in the theater department than I did working on my accounting studies. I speak to a lot of college students and high school students, and the question I always get at every presentation is, what's the one class I should take if I want to be in business later on? I say, take a theater class. That training has helped me tremendously in my business. I've done everything from Shakespeare to musicals to drama, and it paid off for me in a large way. So when people, I'm kind of a reserved person when you meet me, and then they're surprised to learn, oh, wait a minute, you were on the stage, so.
Well, thanks again, Dave.
Yeah.
This was a great conversation, and we hope to have you back. Whatever the things that you are involved with right now, maybe we share that story. But
Okay.
Thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for what you're doing.